Was talk to me a little bit about what COVID was like in the ER.
So when it first started, obviously I actually got back from a cruise on, I think it was March 14th of 2020. And the week I was on the cruise, the world exploded as far as the U.S., I guess. It was like the U.S. decided it's time to get real. We got back on a Sunday, I think it was. We came home. We're like, oh, we got to go get groceries. There was nothing in the stores. We were like, what in the world happened? We didn't even know, but they had shut the port down and weren't going to let us in initially. They weren't going to let our cruise ship back in.
You almost had to spend 14 days on the cruise
Yeah,
ship.
we didn't even know this. So they announced it at dinner that the governor of Maryland decided to let our cruise ship into the port. We were the last cruises. They shut the cruise lines down then when we got off the boats. But so I came back to work, I'm not sure what day it was that week. We had a military type tent set up outside. There was a nurse out there with a physician assistant taking care of patients that had cold symptoms. And we hadn't even seen a positive patient at our hospital at this point. But that week I was gone, healthcare just flipped. Everything we knew about our job, it was completely different. And then for a while, we really weren't seeing what you saw, you remember like what was going on in New York City. It was just chaos. We weren't seeing that. We were just, you'd maybe have a COVID patient here or there, but they really weren't too sick.
Because the population of Indiana is what?
I think it's around 100,000, I think. Indiana the town?
Indiana County, Pennsylvania. That Indiana County is 100,000. Is that what you're thinking?
I think it's somewhere around there, but
Okay.
I could be wrong.
Okay. But the city is more like 10 to 15, right?
Yeah, I think 14, 15,000, somewhere in there.
Okay. So that's drastically smaller than New York City is my point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so your density
Yeah.
and the numbers you're dealing with are going to be lower. But then that fall, right around Thanksgiving, we got hit with the first wave of like what it really, bad times. And it was pretty bad then. A lot of patients in the ICU, a lot of patients on our medical floors, people dying every day. And we're all just trying to figure out what do we do? How do you take care of all of this stuff? Because everything changed. Somebody passes away, your whole process of how you would normally take care of it, you had to change a little bit at first. And then some of those things now they're like, oh, okay, we don't need to do that. We've changed processes and gone backwards some to where we used to be. But last fall though, 21, COVID hit real bad. It was not fun working in the hospital last winter. And it was like 3 months of just, we'd probably admit 5 to 10 COVID patients a day. They'd come through the door and you could look at the person and think, they don't have a very good chance of living. And then you'd find out 3 days later that they did pass away. The ICU, I think the one weekend we had 12 patients pass away in 2 days in our ICU. It was just, there was times people were waiting for an ICU bed on one of our medical floors. And it was like you were almost waiting for somebody to pass away to open up an ICU bed because once you went on a ventilator, it just wasn't good. It wasn't like we put people on ventilators either, just to we'll put them on a ventilator.
And we don't
This will speed up the process.
Yeah.
It was literally, if you didn't put them on a ventilator, they were going to die even sooner. That was your last option. And the thing is nobody ever trained for this, so we didn't have good treatment options. We didn't know what was going to work. What's the best treatment for that. But thankfully we made it through that, and things have definitely eased up comparatively to where they were last winter. We're not admitting hardly anyone now with COVID. It's very few and far between, thankfully.
And last fall, whenever it was really peaking like that, you're talking about seeing people come in that you would look at them and say, I'm not sure if you have a good chance. Is that based on symptoms or based on body type, age? Because what's your range? Like, what kind of age range did you see passing away?
20s up all the way up. Typically, you would look at what were their vital signs, how low was their oxygen level, and then obviously, you looked at their body type. Were they overweight? What kind of other health conditions did they have? Pre-existing health conditions definitely did not help in the body type. If you're overweight, you didn't typically do as good. But
it was last fall was actually when my dad spent quite a bit of time in the ER from COVID.
I remember that.
Fortunately, he came through it, but it was a very scary time.
It was, yeah. It was scary for sure.
Yeah. How do you, being a guy that's on the inside through the COVID years, how do you respond to, I'll use the word conspiracy theorists, I'll use the phrases like non-medical people who think they know everything that's happening in the hospital or in your field?
Yeah,
like how do you handle
it's challenging.
COVID, vaccines, that's masks, the whole thing. Like, how do you walk through that?
I mean, like with the masks, we get yelled at every day about people saying, "I'm not putting a mask on," and I don't like wearing the mask either. I would love to just burn the masks. I'm not gonna lie, but my hospital has a policy that when I'm taking care of patients, I have to have a mask on. When you come into hospital as a patient, you have to have a mask on. And I always tell them, listen, I don't make the policies. It's just my job. Just put the mask on. It's not, there's a lot of things in life you have to do that you don't like. It's everything. A lot of people probably don't like a speed limit of 25 miles an hour. Well, if you break it, you might get pulled over and get a ticket. Mm-hmm. Different things. So
yeah, I always tell people that we have freedom in America as long as you stay inside the lines.
Yeah, there's limits to your
step
freedom.
out.
Yeah,
the government will swoop in.
You're free to a point.
They have cells for people like that.
But we've definitely, we had a lot of people come in last winter that you could, walk in the room and you'd see them. And you're like, oh, they've got COVID. Like this person's got COVID pneumonia. And patients would literally say, I don't believe in COVID. It's fake. And it's like, well, we're going to swab you for it. And they would tell you why the swabs are fake. They're going to be positive anyways. Meanwhile, it was like roughly, I think 20% of the people we swabbed was positive. Like our high positive rate was like 20%, I think. But these patients would tell you they didn't believe in it. COVID's fake. It's not real. It's just a conspiracy, whatever. It's just our government. And then you'd go into the room 20 minutes later and say, hey, you're tested positive for COVID and you have bilateral pneumonia. And they would look at you like, you could see the fear set in at that point. And it wasn't like you wanted to go in there and scare them, but it was a reality check, I think, for a lot of them. If they pretended it was fake, it wouldn't affect them until it did. And with the vaccine, I got my vaccine. I was the first person at my hospital to get a vaccine. Now, I haven't got it. I've got one booster since. I haven't got any more boosters. Yeah. I've had COVID. I did all right with it. What we're seeing right now doesn't seem too bad. Hopefully it continues down that trend and it literally just becomes the common cold or whatnot. And I don't agree with like vaccine mandates at all. I don't think it should be mandatory. I don't think you should have to get a COVID vaccine. If you want to get one, go get it. Great. We did see a benefit last winter. If you were vaccinated, you typically did better with COVID. Now, with the strains now, I don't know if it makes a lot of difference, but it doesn't seem to have as big of effect. But people aren't getting as sick either. We're not seeing a lot of COVID pneumonia now. It's
because COVID's morphing and because it's viral, right? And then and then the vaccine is an experimental mRNA for the first ever kind, right?
Right.
And so all of that is it's a completely different conversation than vaccines like polio.
Right. Yeah, it was the first mRNA vaccine that we had. So, a lot of people say it's not even a vaccine. The way it creates the immunity isn't the same as a regular vaccine. Now, I'm not going to be able to get into the full details of how. I know it has to do with spike proteins and stuff, but I don't know the full. I haven't done all the research on it, but
I feel like it's more like the flu shot than an actual vaccine because it's reformulated.
Right, because it's a viral thing, so it's constantly evolving. So you got to try to make a new dose for that next
Yeah.
strain that is coming. It's like the flu shot. It's, you never know how effective it's going to be until after it already happened.
What kind of things should the government mandate medically, if not that? Because you're required certain shots to go to for your kids to go to public school, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because you see, I mean, medically, like there are benefits to those.
Well, yeah. I
right?
mean, smallpox. I don't think anybody wants smallpox or
Yeah.
polio or whooping cough. I don't think anybody wants those coming back. I mean, we did have whooping cough come back, but because of people not getting vaccines. So I think vaccines definitely have their place for sure. But then I think there are things, the flu shot. Do I think it should be mandatory? No. It's your personal preference. Do typically if it has benefit, it's going to not necessarily even, you still might get it. It just might not get as sick from it.
Yeah.
So that's your personal, decision whether you want to take that chance or not. But I don't know. I don't like necessarily a lot of the government getting involved in healthcare. I feel like they already have too much control because they have so much effect on insurance companies and what tests people are allowed to get, or whether their insurance company will approve to have that test, whether even though a doctor feels it's medically necessary, insurance companies might shut it down. And things get missed because their insurance companies didn't approve it. So I don't really like the idea of a lot of government control in healthcare.